Forget the pharaohs, the pyramids, and the golden sarcophagi for a moment. Have you ever wondered what it was really like to be an ordinary person in ancient Egypt? What did you eat for breakfast? What was your job? Did you go to school? Did you fall in love? Today, we're pushing aside the grand monuments and the tales of gods and kings to uncover the hidden world of the everyday Egyptian. We'll explore the bustling streets, the humble homes, and the daily routines of the millions who built one of the greatest civilizations in history. Get ready, because we're about to travel back in time to experience a day in the life of an ancient Egyptian. First, let's wake up. The sun rises over the Nile, and for most Egyptians, the day begins early. You wouldn't be living in a grand palace. Instead, imagine a simple, rectangular house made of mud bricks. The walls would be whitewashed to reflect the intense sun, and the windows would be small, high openings to let in light, but keep out the heat and dust. Your roof, flat, probably made of palm logs and thatch. This flat roof was more than just a cover, it was a whole extra living space. In the cool evenings, families would gather there to eat, socialize, and even sleep under the stars. Inside, the furniture was minimal. You'd have some reed mats on the floor, maybe a low wooden stool, a few clay pots for storing water and food, and a small chest for your valuables. No fancy bedrooms here. Most people slept on mats or a slightly raised platform. Now, what's for breakfast? Forget your cereal and coffee. A typical Egyptian breakfast would be simple and quick. You'd likely eat a coarse loaf of bread, maybe dipped in some water or beer, and a handful of onions or leeks. Bread was the absolute staple of the Egyptian diet, so important that workers were often paid in loaves of bread. The beer wasn't like the beer we drink today. It was thick, nutritious, and more like a liquid porridge or vital source of calories for a hard day's work. After this quick meal, it's time to head to work. For over 90% of the population, work meant farming. Life revolved around the Nile and its annual flood, the inundation. When the river receded, it left behind a layer of rich, black silt, perfect for growing crops. As a farmer, your year was divided into 3 seasons: Akad, the flooding season; Prit, the growing season; and Shamu, the harvest season. During the growing season, you'd be out in the fields from sunrise to sunset, plowing with a team of oxen, planting seeds like wheat and barley, and maintaining irrigation canals to water your crops. It was back-breaking labor under a scorching sun. But what about when the land was flooded? Farmers weren't idle. This was when the pharaoh would call upon you for massive state-building projects. That's right. The people building the pyramids and temples were mostly farmers, working during the off-season as a form of taxation. But not everyone was a farmer. In the towns and cities, you find a vibrant community of artisans and craftsmen. Let's say you were a potter. You'd spend your day at your wheel, shaping clay from the Nile's banks into everything from simple beer mugs to elaborate storage jars. Or maybe you were a weaver, creating fine linen cloth. Egypt was famous for its linen. Or a carpenter, a metalworker, a jeweler, or even a baker in a large estate's kitchen. These skilled workers had a slightly higher status than farmers. They often worked in workshops attached to temples or noble estates, and were paid in food, drink, and other goods. Their lives were still hard, but their skills were highly valued. Imagine a street buzzing with activity, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the smell of fresh bread from a bakery, the chatter of merchants selling their wares. What about women's roles? An Egyptian woman's life was centered on the home and family. She was known as the mistress of the house. Her responsibilities were immense. She would grind grain into flour, physically demanding tasks that took hours each day: bake bread, brew beer, fetch water from the Nile or a local well, and raise the children. If her family had a small plot of land, she would help in the fields, especially during the harvest. While men dominated public life, women had significant legal rights. They could own property, run businesses, and even initiate a divorce. Some women from wealthier families could become priestesses, and in rare cases, a woman could even rule as pharaoh, like Hatshepsut. But for the average woman, life was a cycle of domestic labor and child-rearing. Let's talk about family and social life. Family was the cornerstone of Egyptian society. Marriage was expected, and it wasn't a grand religious ceremony, but more of a social agreement. A man would simply move his belongings into a woman's house. Love and affection were important, as we can see from surviving poems and letters. Children were considered a blessing. However, child mortality was high, so having many children was a way to ensure some would survive to adulthood and care for you in your old age. What did Egyptians do for fun? They weren't all work and no play. They loved music, dancing, and festivals. On religious holidays, the whole community would gather for processions, feasts, and celebrations. They played board games, with the most popular being Senet, a game that symbolized the journey to the afterlife. We've found Senet boards in tombs from all social classes. Children played with simple toys like wooden animals on wheels, dolls made of cloth, and balls made of reeds or leather. People also loved storytelling and listening to music played on harps, lutes, and flutes. And of course, living by the Nile meant that swimming, fishing, and boating were popular pastimes. As the day comes to an end, the family would gather for the main meal. This would be more substantial than breakfast. You might have a vegetable stew, more bread, fish from the Nile, and of course, more beer. Meat like poultry, beef, or mutton was a luxury, usually reserved for festivals or the wealthy. After dinner, as darkness fell, the family would gather on the rooftop to cool off, tell stories, and look at the stars, just as their ancestors had done for generations. Finally, what about health and the afterlife? Life was tough. The average life expectancy was only around 30 to 35 years, largely due to disease, infection, and the dangers of childbirth. Egyptians had a good knowledge of medicine for their time, and doctors could set broken bones and perform simple surgeries. But a simple infected tooth could easily be fatal. This short, hard life is perhaps why they were so focused on the afterlife. For an ordinary Egyptian, a grand tomb was out of the question. You'd be buried in a simple pit in the desert sand, often wrapped in a reed mat or linen shroud. You might be buried with a few personal items, like a clay pot with some food or your favorite tool, in the hope they would be useful in the next life. The elaborate mummification and grand tombs were reserved for the pharaohs and the elite, but the belief in an afterlife was universal. Everyone hoped to pass the final judgment and enter the field of reeds, a paradise where they could live on for eternity. So, the next time you see a picture of a pyramid, remember the millions of ordinary people who lived in its shadow. Their lives were not filled with gold and grandeur, but with hard work, family, simple joys, and a deep connection to the river that gave them life. They were the farmers, the artisans, the mothers, and the fathers, the true foundation of ancient Egypt. Their legacy isn't just in stone monuments, it's in the enduring story of human resilience, community, and the timeless rhythm of daily life. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you enjoyed this glimpse into the real ancient Egypt, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure into the past. See you next time.